Let's begin with that vaccine rollout, though, as we see Pfizer shares pull back on the initial day of the vaccines rolling out to key nursing homes as well as essential workers. I want to bring in Jared Holz, who is an analyst at Jefferies, for the very latest on that front. And Jared, let's sort of take a moment to take a step back to kind of look at the rollout itself. I mean, when you think about how this is all developed, it has been an incredible pace, a huge, just a rapid rate with which this is all played out. How are you looking at that right now? And as we look to Moderna, the next vaccine to be rolled out?
Thank you for having me. You're so right. This has been just an incredible year. If we think back to the February and March timeframe when the coronavirus first really started to impact the U.S. with all of the reported cases and all the progress that has been made since then, to have a vaccine out basically 9 months later is unprecedented. So just to think about where we are relatively versus earlier on in the year is just incredible. I feel like at this point we basically have to just be cognizant of drug rollouts. This is one of the most significant therapeutic introductions or product launches in the history of the industry. And I think the best thing that we can do right now is sort of, sit back and hope that, Pfizer, Moderna, and other companies in this realm are going to be able to, fulfill the supply that they have promised.
Yeah, and Pfizer shares up by about 8% on the year. We've talked before, you mentioned a lot of the speculation in some of these biotech names had already been pricing in kind of the best case scenario when it comes to efficacy on the vaccine front. Moderna also looking to, over the weekend, we got that update that it looked like the government was going to be boosting the amount of money that they put into that. We've talked also about pricing when it comes to companies here making profits on these. Pfizer wanting to do that, not necessarily the plans there for Johnson & Johnson. Talking about how it's all shaking out relative to where we were just a couple of months ago when we didn't know how effective these vaccines were going to be.
Well, certainly the efficacy bar has been raised quite dramatically to have 90% or better efficacy in these trials for the, those that you mentioned, Pfizer and Moderna, both putting up excellent results there. We're still not exactly sure, longer term what all of this means. The trials were run very quickly. We don't have that much data on durability, meaning the sustainability of the vaccine once it's in patients. We're looking at a lot of these clinical data sets weeks or months after the second injection, if that. So there's still a lot to be learned longer term as far as how well these vaccines do. And I think the pricing dynamics to me, and then we can get to all the excitement around the stocks as well. But the pricing dynamic is very, very interesting. If you consider the flu vaccines at $1 or $2 per patient per year, and to have these vaccines at $30 to $50 per patient per year, we're in an entirely different realm in terms of economics for these companies. And I just do not know whether pricing at these sort of levels that we've been talking about for the better part of the last few months are going to be able to hold. And I think that is going to be the most interesting element when we talk about the stocks going forward, as far as the valuation, what these vaccines are worth to the companies that are going to be providing them. If they're one-time deals, if they're annual, can we withstand this sort of pricing? And again, the government has been so influential in the development pathway, giving money to pretty much all the companies involved other than Pfizer as part of Operation Warp Speed, that it becomes difficult to sort of ascertain, who deserves value for what, with the government being, the biggest R&D bolus. And then on the other hand, having to purchase the product once it's made already. So a lot of variables here. We're still in the very, very early innings of understanding how this is all going to work out. And so we have to kind of wait and see now.
Yeah, certainly questions about just how profitable these vaccines are going to be to these companies. To that point, we're just looking at the vaccine stocks right now, all of them pulling back today, except for Moderna, although it's pretty flat right now. This is a little unique, though, in that investors are looking at this from a supply chain standpoint, right? We're looking at the pharmacies like a CVS that are likely to benefit in a big way because they are the ones that are actually going to be inoculating, especially in nursing homes, for example. You've also got FedEx and UPS who are part of this big supply chain right now. How do you think think investors should be looking at that chain right now? And where do you think the most opportunities are?
Well, I think there's definitely opportunity in the supply chain. In that respect, as an investor, you sort of don't really have to select the winner or loser in the vaccine game on the biotech and pharma level. You can kind of play the entire space or this entire concept, without making a particular bet on one program. So I think FedEx, UPS, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, CVS, and Walgreens are all going to be instrumental in rolling these vaccines out to patients. So I think that might be, potentially less return because, obviously those companies are involved in things that are much greater and broader than only the COVID-19 vaccine. But in a way, I think less downside as well, because as other programs come out, Johnson & Johnson we're looking at, and Novavax and Arcturus, there are several other programs here which could sort of derail some of the momentum for Pfizer or Moderna if the efficacy is at or around 90%. So without having to hand select or make a discrete bet on one of these vaccine programs, you can kind of play the entire space, which I think a lot of investors are already starting to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the downside. Clearly not going to be as much if you don't have to pick a winner in the race for the vaccines here. But since we know that the threshold's so high, 90-95% when we're talking about Pfizer and Moderna, I imagine there's quite a bit of risk here to the downside on a stock like Novavax, which you just showed, up 2,800% on the year compared to that 8% increase for Pfizer. That one was kind of a head scratcher too when we think about that company not necessarily bringing a vaccine to market, but still getting money through Operation Warp Speed. Talk to me about the downside risks there if some of these companies aren't able to post the numbers anywhere close to 90 or 95%.
Yeah, totally, Zach. And that's been our point on how we've been sort of addressing and articulating our view on the broader vaccine complex from a stock perspective for 3 to 4 months, maybe longer now. I'm not exactly sure. That at the end of the day, we would be in a situation where not every program can be a winner. So while we are, obviously hoping that all the companies, including Novavax, present good data, good enough to get on the market, in actuality or in real life terms, there's no possible way that all the companies that are involved in the research and development on the back of Warp Speed or not are going to be able to be real players. And so Pfizer and Moderna, if you look at the government contracts they've already secured, is good for almost 2 years of inoculating literally every patient in this country. I'm not really sure the market is there as far as the, how they're evaluating the companies or the space. But clearly, if the efficacy levels for any of the other programs that report data subsequent to Pfizer and Moderna are not, in the 80 to 90% efficacy range, there needs to be another dynamic at play which makes them interesting. And so that's why I keep on coming back to pricing, because if a company like J&J can offer, let's say, 80% or 85% efficacy, but pretty much give the drug away, I think the government will have a very, very difficult time turning them down. But I agree. I think the downside for Novavax and many other of these stocks is obviously very meaningful. That is to say that the efficacy data is not near what we've seen so far.
Jefferies Analyst Jared Holz, it's good to talk to you today, and hope to have you back on the show soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.